Add Eric Cybert, Eastern District of Virginia, formerly the lead prosecutor there, to a growing list of inside resistance to the Department of Justice that have basically screwed their courage to the sticking post and have decided they can't do Donald Trump's bidding any longer and headed for the exit. Eric Cybert, one of the leaders of the leading prosecutor offices among the Department of Justice, joins now a growing list of opposition. We cover what happened in Virginia, why he was fired, and Donald Trump's commands that he refused to follow of going after his political enemies and hurry up and prosecute them. And here's a clip from the Legal AF podcast.
You know those radical Reagan, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush judges? Popok, just briefly tell us about Virginia, and then we'll take our break.
Yeah, absolutely. So add Eric Cybert to a long list of Department of Justice leaders who have said, nope, we're not going to violate the Department of Justice principles of prosecution, the Department of Justice manual, our professional ethics, our duty as a officer of the court to conjure up phony criminal claims or allegations or prosecutions against the political rival of Donald Trump because he tells us to. Cybert had worked for over 10 years in the Eastern District of Virginia. He had been the counterintelligence chief and one that went after drug dealers. He was supported by both senators in Virginia, Warner and the other one, Warner and Tim, who's the guy that Tim Kaine? That was in May. So for Donald Trump to say, I got rid of him because he's supported by blue. I'm like, that was May. This is October. You got rid of him because he refused to file a mortgage fraud case where none exists against Letitia James. This is Donald. Look, we heard about this already. This is let me give you the links in the conspiracy chain, the complicity chain. Donald Trump has Bill Pulte, the Nepo baby, heir to the Pulte construction fortune, who bought his way into a position as the head of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the mortgage liquidity entities. He has him do a social media post, cherry picking a couple of documents, claiming that everybody in the Democratic Party is committing mortgage fraud. His version of mortgage fraud is you have two primary home residences, two homes or mortgages that you said you were going to live in as your primary residence. You can only have one. All right. Then the next step in the chain is Donald Trump then retweets it or does a mean social media post about it. Then Pam Bondi gets a letter that is choreographed to come from Bill Pulte on a criminal referral. She then announces she's opening a criminal referral. She then sends it to Ed Martin, who's in charge of the weaponization of the Department of Justice. I know his title is against the weaponization, but he's just the weaponizer of the Department of Justice. She then appoints some sort of other MAGA sycophant in John Sarconi up in the Northern District of New York to open up an investigation against Letitia James and her New York Attorney General's office. And Ed Martin's going to do the mortgage side and he's going to do the other side. And all this is going on. And they get the headlines that they want. Adam Schiff and Letitia James, federal probes opened up against them. Okay. So we have that. Then you got to get prosecutors to bring the cases. So why Virginia? Everybody who's out of short pants, I think, knows that the New York Attorney General lives in New York. She works out of two major offices, one in Albany, New York, in the capital, and the other one in New York City. She does not live in Virginia, okay? She bought a property in Virginia, could have been for her father. She had a niece fill out with a power of attorney some of the closing documents. In those closing documents, someone checked the box that said she was going to live there as her primary residence. I think her father actually was going to live there as a primary residence. But other documentation that the bank had that Bill Pulte ignored said that everybody on the lender side knew that this was not her primary residence because the Attorney General of New York doesn't live in Virginia. So no fraud. They give that file to Cybert's office and they go find a fraud and bring a case, meaning he's got to like get a grand jury. More importantly, in order to comply with the Department of Justice manual and the principles of federal prosecution, you can't even start an investigation unless you believe there's probable cause to believe that you can sustain a conviction, meaning through appeal. He was like the power of attorney by the niece and with other documents that say the bank knew that this was a second home? And what am I prosecuting? And so he wasn't going to do it. It was a race to see whether he was going to get fired or resigned, but he's not the only one. How many stories have we done on this show already? We've got the Eastern District of Tennessee prosecutor who refuses to bring phony charges against Abrego Garcia and gets shown the door. We've got Danielle Sassoon, who in New York was a rock star and considered to be the leading candidate to be, she's an Orthodox Jewish woman prosecutor who is considered to be the leading candidate to be the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. She resigns because she's ordered by Emil Bovee, who's now on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, but was Donald Trump's favorite criminal defense lawyer, to dismiss the indictment against Eric Adams because they had an unholy deal in which Adams would destroy the sanctuary city status of Manhattan in return for saving his bacon. And she said, dismiss the indictment? We're coming to you with a superseding indictment because we've got more bribery charges. And when she wouldn't do it, she quit and published an 8-page letter in the New York Times, which we'll talk about at the second, a little bit later on this podcast. So there's a whole series of prosecutors that are just looking at this and going, nope, not doing it. And they're heroes as far as, and I go further, Ben.
Yep.
Anybody that is left now 10 months into this Department of Justice, that's serving in the Department of Justice, this is now, you know what the Department of Justice is. And as I've said, it's the most corrupt Department of Justice we've ever had in our history. And you staying there, you are now complicit. And if that means that you are violating your oath as a lawyer, you're violating your oath as a prosecutor, and for you to say, well, I'm just doing my job as a career bureaucrat and civil servant and prosecute. No, you're doing the bidding of Donald Trump and his corrupt Department of Justice. And you are now just as responsible in history's eyes and in the public's eyes as if you were Donald Trump. Leave now. There's plenty of law firms and public interest groups that would be happy to hire you. Democracy Forward is hiring dozens of people who have left the Department of Justice because they refuse to be used as a tool by Donald Trump's authoritarian abuse of the rule of law.
When we come back, I want to talk briefly about what Senator Schiff, a former prosecutor, told me, how this is actually impacting trials as well and how it's harming the ability of prosecutors to get convictions in meritorious cases as well. I'll talk about that.
Welcome back. The podcast sits at the intersection of law and politics, so you don't have to. Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Midas Touch Network. I co-founded that podcast with Ben Meiselas 5 years ago, and we called it and branded it Legal AF for a reason, and now you know why. If you want to become a full-fledged member of the Legal AF community, a card-carrying member, watch the podcast on on the YouTube for Midas Touch. Listen to it wherever you get your audio podcast from. Just plug in Legal AF and then come over to Legal AF, the Substack, become a paid member, and Legal AF, the YouTube. See, many different ways to become part of and contribute to our Legal AF community. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popak. I'm Michael Popak, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popak Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popak Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states. States and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.